Yo, what's going on, everybody? We are back for the week 5 rankings. Starting off as usual with my running backs, going to be doing my top 30 today. One thing to note, we have started bye week, so this week we are going to have the Buccaneers, the Chargers, the Seahawks, and the Browns all on bye. So no Kenneth Walker, no Jerome Ford, no Austin Eckler, and no Rachaad White going to be ranked here. There's also a possibility that Jonathan Taylor comes back this week, so we're going to have to monitor that situation and how that's going to affect Zach Moss, obviously. But right now we don't know for sure if he's actually going to be coming back or not. They have opened the practice window for him, so he could come back this week, but just a situation we'll have to monitor. Now, before we get into the rankings, make sure you drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you want more content like this. I got videos coming all year. And if you have any sit-start questions for week 5, just leave them down below in the comments and I will get back to you as soon as I can. All right, now let's get into these rankings. All right, first up, to nobody's surprise, it's going to be Christian McCaffrey. He is the #1 fantasy player on the year, has the most points scored out of wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends, doesn't matter. He is in a tier of his own. He is playing the Dallas Cowboys this week, so it's a tough matchup, but it does not matter. I don't imagine there's going to be many times this year where I don't have him ranked as the running back 1, so you can kind of just lock that in going forward. And after him is going to be Bijan Robinson, who had a really good week last week, even though the Atlanta Falcons did not. And going up against the Houston Texans this week is a great matchup for running back, so we should just absolutely dominate here. Regardless of most matchups, he's going to do really good, so in a plus matchup, it should be a spot where he absolutely crushes. And then after him, the running back 3, a guy that we saw bounce back this past week, is going to be Josh Jacobs going up against the Green Bay Packers, which is another really good matchup for running backs. That will definitely have a factor on his ranking because he's not totally matchup proof as it seems like this year, but he's still going to be really good just based on his talent and the amount of volume that he's still getting. But in a great matchup like we have with the Green Bay Packers, it's pretty easy to predict that he's going to have a really good week. And then the last guy in this tier is going to be Tony Pollard. Didn't have a very good week this past week, but is not somebody who I'm worried about whatsoever. They are going up against the San Francisco Niners, so that is a tough matchup for him and definitely can cap his upside somewhat this week, but he's still just too talented, too involved in this offense to really be ranked outside of the top 5, so I think you're going to be fine regardless. On to the next tier, and at my running back 5, I'm going to have Derrick Henry here, who we finally saw him bounce back to his usual self this past week, which was absolutely great to see. He didn't have a single broken tackle on the year, and then last week I saw him break 3 tackles on the one play where he scored his touchdown. He also threw a touchdown, which is always fun to see, but hopefully it showed this offense that if they get him going, it's going to help everything out, so I think they're just going to keep feeding him, and not a really tough matchup, so I think he should be able to have a good week again. And the next up is going to be a running back who is a lot higher than he normally is because he has such a good matchup, but it's going to be Brian Robinson. He's going up against Chicago Bears on Thursday Night Football this week. They have given up the 2nd most points to running backs on the year, so I think this is going to be a spot for him to absolutely crush. He's actually the running back 7 on the year. He's been really, really good so far. I thought he was going to be bad last week. He did score a touchdown, so it kind of saved his day. Besides that, he wasn't very good. But they were playing the Philadelphia Eagles, which is one of the hardest defenses against the run, so to see him still produce there is definitely an encouraging sign to see. And in this matchup, I think they're going to lean on him and just ride him to a victory, so he should dominate here, and I'd be very excited to play him if I had him. And the other guy in this tier is going to be Travis Etienne, who has been pretty good on the year so far. He didn't do a ton this past week, but he got 20 carries and had some receptions, so he was involved a ton in the offense, but there just wasn't a lot going on there. Always hard when you travel into London, but they are going to be there again this week, and they're playing the Buffalo Bills, so it's another tough matchup for him. But he's so involved in the offense, so explosive, that he's going to be fine no matter what, but just a little bit lower this week because it is a hard matchup, and guy like Brian Robinson has such a good matchup. You're obviously going to be playing both of them, though, if you have them. And then next up in my tier 4, I'm going to have DeAndre Swift here, who has absolutely been dominating this backfield since the week 2. And Kenneth Gainwell was barely involved this past week, so I'm not too worried about him. I think the only thing that's really going to take this backfield away from him is injury at this point. So I think you just keep playing him as a top 12 running back going forward until we see something change. They are playing the Los Angeles Rams this week, which is a tougher matchup, but not the hardest, so not too worried about it. I think this offensive line should be able to be just fine. After Swift, we're going to have David Montgomery here, who is going up against Carolina Panthers. He had 30 touches last week, which is absolutely insane because he was coming off an injury, and it seems like he's going to be the lead back until we see otherwise, which at this point I don't really expect unless there's another injury. Maybe at the bye week they get Jahmyr Gibbs more involved, but right now Gibbs is really just kind of playing a role. David Montgomery is the lead back here right now. The Carolina Panthers have one of the easiest matchups for running backs, so it should be a spot where David Montgomery is really, really effective again for fantasy. After Monty, we are going to have Kyron Williams here, who has honestly, I think, been the best pickup for the waiver wire this year, even better than Puka Nacua. Funny that they're both on the same team, but Kyron Williams is the running back 3 on the year, and finding a running back is going to be more valuable than having a wide receiver. Obviously, they are both studs, but Kyron Williams has been unbelievable. This is a little bit lower than where he normally is because they are playing the Philadelphia Eagles this week, which is one of the toughest, if not the toughest matchup for running backs on the year so far. But he's getting like 80-90% of the backfield work, so it doesn't really matter because he's going to get so much volume that he'll overcome any matchup. But did have to move him down just a little bit this week, but still regardless going to be a top 10 running back. After Kyron is going to be another great recent waiver wire pickup in Devon Achane. He outsnapped Raheem Mostert this past week, which it was very encouraging to see and kind of surprising, honestly. Now, Raheem did fumble twice, so that could have been part of the reason why, but not totally sure. Regardless, Achane has just been too productive to keep him off the field anymore. Now, Jeff Wilson may be coming back this week. Honestly, I don't think it'll be this week, but he has a possibility to, and it will be sometime soon, so that could affect his role a little bit. But honestly, he's not somebody who needs a ton of touches to be really effective, and I only think his snap count and volume is going to keep going up. And the New York Giants defense is not one I'm really that scared of, so I think that he's going to have another good week this week. And honestly, I want as many pieces of this offense as I can get. Even though they looked bad last week, I'm not really worried about it whatsoever. And we've seen it. Obviously, he's somebody who can go for 2 touchdowns any week. He's done it the past 2 weeks now. Not expecting that, but it does show you his upside, and his role should be good enough where he has a decent floor at this point. Next up is going to be Joe Mixon. He didn't do a ton this past week, but he was playing the Titans, who have one of the best run defenses in the entire NFL, and honestly, for how good they've been, he ran decently against them. The bigger issue is just this entire offense is kind of in shambles right now, and not having a good offense definitely affects him. But they're playing Arizona this week, and that is definitely a chance for him and this offense to bounce back. I don't know if they will because Joe Burrow, I don't think, will get healthy. But regardless, Mixon has enough volume where he'll be fine, and this defense is not that scary, so he should be a good start this week. But I don't think he has really good upside, so I would temper my expectations somewhat, but still probably going to be in your lineup. And then the last guy I'm going to have in this tier is going to be James Cook. This past week was really interesting for him because he finally scored his first touchdown of the year. They kind of forced him in, which was funny to see, but he didn't run the ball very well, which he's been doing really good so far this year. So it was kind of opposite of what has been going on. Regardless, he had a decent day for fantasy. And when you're a part of this offense, you're always going to have that possibility. Now, they are flying to London. They're playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have actually been pretty good against the running back this year. So my expectations are a little bit lower than normal for him this week, as you can tell by my running back 13 ranking of him, but still going to be in your lineup pretty much no matter what. And in this offense, he's always going to have a chance for a big day. Now, on to the next tier, and at my running back 14, we are going to have Saquon Barkley here. Now, obviously, this is very dependent on if he actually plays or not. It sounded like last week he was a possibility of playing, so I do imagine he will this week, but still not totally sure on that. We're going to have to monitor that situation throughout the entire week. And if he does play, I don't imagine he'll be 100% yet. So I have my expectations tempered for him, but just with the running back landscape how it is, going to be in your lineup pretty much no matter what. And play Miami Dolphins, that's a good matchup for running back, so he should be usable and be able to have a good week even if he's not 100%. And then after Barkley, I'm going to have Alvin Kamara here, who had his first week back. It was a really gross week, honestly, not because of him, more because of Derek Carr and his injury, but Kamara had 13 receptions, which is obviously unbelievable, and we love to see that, but only like 33 yards on that, which was by far the lowest yards on that many receptions ever by like 40 yards. It was absolutely insane, all the stats going around about it. And obviously that many receptions will give him a decent fantasy day, but we're not really going to be expecting that going forward every single week, but he will be involved in the passing game, which is nice to see, and we kind of knew that already. Kendra Miller wasn't really a factor. Honestly, Kamara was pretty much the lead back here, and so really just for Derek Carr to get healthy and for their offense to be back to what it was, and he should be really good. I don't know if that'll quite be this week. And they are playing the New England Patriots, which is a decent defense. They're not terrifying, but they're not super easy. So I think he'll be solid this week, but I'm not expecting a massive game from him. And then after him, we're going to have Raheem Mostert here. We kind of talked a lot about him with Achane. I don't know if it's quite an overreaction right now to have Achane over him at this point, although he did outsnap him. He did outtouch him. It was kind of a weird game overall. They're playing a tough defense. Mostert fumbled the ball twice, but obviously I think this is going to be more of a 50-50 time split. And so each week it could really go either way. I think they're both going to be good starts. I just have Achane higher this week. I think just what he's shown over the past couple weeks, I think the coaching staff will just keep getting him more and more involved. So I have him higher at this point, but this could really go either way. After Raheem and at my running back 17, I'm going to have Aaron Jones here. They're playing the Las Vegas Raiders, so it's a really good matchup just for basically everybody, and this offense looked really bad last week, but Aaron Jones was barely involved at all, even though he was active. So I imagine with a full week of practice now and being healthy, or remotely healthy, I guess, that he should be much more involved this week, and they really need him, as we can tell. And against a defense that is not very good, I could definitely have him ranked higher. I'm just still worried about that injury, but I think regardless, he will have a bounce back week this week. And then the last guy in this tier, we're going to have Isaiah Pacheco here, who has gotten more and more involved in this offense as the year has gone on, which is really great to see. He got 20 carries this past week for only the second time in his entire career, and they were playing a really good defense in the New York Jets, and he still dominated against them. So hopefully we just continue to see his involvement and his uses continue to go up. And this week they're playing the Minnesota Vikings, who have actually been pretty good against running backs so far this year, but from what we saw from the Jets, I'm not really too worried about it. Hopefully his involvement just stays what it's at, because if so, then he's going to keep being great for fantasy. And then on to my running back 19, we're going to have James Conner here, who's playing the Cincinnati Bengals. Not a very tough matchup for running backs, and he's been used as a workhorse this entire year. I don't really see that changing for any reason at any point, unless there's an injury, obviously. This offense has also looked a lot better than I think anyone really expected going into the year, especially with Joshua Dobbs. And I'm not really worried about James Conner having a bad week last week against the Niners. So I'm going to keep firing him up. I think he'll be solid again this week. And then at my running back 20, I'm going to have Jahmyr Gibbs here. I think we really just need to adjust our expectations with Gibbs going forward, because he's obviously not being utilized in the way that we kind of all thought he would be. At least I know I did. And he's still a part of this offense, and he's still very, very explosive, gets used in the receiving game. So he still has value for fantasy, but I think what a lot of us expected, that just isn't quite the reality of how he's being used, at least not right now. And until we see a change, I can't rank him any higher than this, because they do have a really, really good matchup this week against Carolina. So this could be a spot for him to kind of break out, because we haven't really seen that yet. But like I talked about, David Montgomery is a lead back here, and I don't really see that changing anytime soon. Next up, we're going to have Alexander Mattison, who had another pretty solid week this past week, and Cam Akers did actually play, who also looked pretty solid. And so I do think that Cam Akers will continue to get more and more worked in. I have no idea. This backfield could go so many different ways. It could continue to be Madison's. Cam Akers could take over. It could turn into a 50-50 timeshare. Honestly, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised by any of those things, but right now, Madison is the lead back there and getting the majority of the work. Now, this week, they are playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have been really hard against running backs, so I am a little bit more worried this week than I was the past 2 weeks, because he is pretty matchup dependent, but he's still getting enough volume. This is a good offense where he should still be solid as long as his volume stays the same, and I think that it will, so I think he's around this low-end RB2 range right now. Another guy who has really been struggling is going to be Ramondre Stevenson, my running back 22. Now, there was chatter last week about Ezekiel Elliott getting the starting running back reps. That didn't happen. I don't really think that's going to at any point, but overall this offense has just not looked good whatsoever. Ramondre hasn't looked good, and they have another really tough matchup this week against the New Orleans Saints, who have been a really strong defense so far this year. So honestly, if I had better options, I would be looking to not play Ramondre this week, although he can still have a solid week because he's involved in the passing game the most, but I'm really scared about it. I do think better days are coming, but right now for his matchups, this is just not good with how this offense has looked so far, and I personally would be trying to bench him at this point. My running back 23, I'm going to have Breece Hall here. He had a really nice run this past week and was a little bit more involved, but still not what we are quite hoping for. But they did have a really tough matchup against the Chiefs, so it was encouraging to see what we did see. And if Zach Wilson can play anything like he did that night, then it's going to be a lot better for this entire offense. And they are playing the Denver Broncos this week, who have given up a bunch of points to Justin Fields. They gave up 70 to Miami Dolphins. So I think that this is a place where the confidence can continue to build for this offense. People like Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, and hopefully Zach Wilson can continue to build on what they had last week. So this actually is a spot where I'm comfortable playing Breece Hall, although he still just isn't, it's not his backfield. It's still shared between him and Dalvin Cook. But we've already seen explosive runs this year from him, so he could break one at any time, although he doesn't quite have that top end speed yet, but it's coming. And then the last guy in this tier, I'm going to have Dameon Pierce here, who we finally saw a really good week from him this past week, but they do have a relatively tough matchup against the Atlanta Falcons this week. They've actually been really good against running backs, but I think this should be a neutral or positive game script, so that's always going to be good for Dameon Pierce. And with how this offense has looked so far this year, I think that there are better days coming for him from what we've had this past couple weeks. And then moving on my last tier to start it off, my running back 25, I'm going to have Khalil Herbert, who finally had a good week this past week. The entire Bears offense did, and it's another thing like I talked about with the Jets, where I'm hoping that they can kind of build some momentum off of it. But they are playing the Commanders, who are a much better defense than the Broncos are, although still not like an elite defense, so I'm not that scared of it, but it is the Bears offense, so that is the scary part. But there was talk about Roschon Johnson starting to take over. I mean, I liked Roschon Johnson, I still do, but it still seems like it's Khalil Herbert's backfield, and with what he showed last week, I don't really think that's going to change anytime soon. And so I do think that he's a decent flex play, but it is pretty dependent on if this offense can continue to play well. But you could also do a lot worse than Khalil Herbert. And the next up is going to be Zach Moss. Now, this is a very, very weird guy to rank right now because he's been playing way better than this, and he should be ranked a lot higher, and he could be if Jonathan Taylor does or doesn't play. Because if Jonathan Taylor doesn't play this week, then I think he's going to be in this tier 5, tier 4 of running backs. But if Jonathan Taylor does play, I don't think he's going to get all the snaps right away. I think that Moss will still be leading the backfield this week, so he will still be able to have a decent week, but he's not going to get these 90-95% snap shares like he has been the past couple weeks. And so this is another situation that we'll have to kind of monitor throughout the week, and his ranking can go up, or I mean, honestly, this is kind of where I have him if Jonathan Taylor does play, maybe a couple spots lower. But if JT doesn't play, then he's going to be a top 15-ish running back. Next up, we're going to have Miles Sanders here, who really struggled this past week, but he was hurt. Chuba Hubbard got a bunch of work, and I think that was mostly because Miles Sanders was hurt. So we're going to want to see the practice reports this week, see if he's healthier. And the Panthers are also playing the Detroit Lions, which is an actually really tough matchup for running back. So another guy I'm kind of scared of this week and would be trying to avoid if I could. But I know what the landscape market is like right now, and it could be tough to avoid that. But I don't think he'll have that good of a week, but you could definitely do worse. And then my running back 28, I'm going to have Najee Harris here. I'm going to have Jaylen Warren right after him. I'm just going to talk about these guys kind of in the same, because obviously it is tough to tell what exactly is going on with this backfield, with this offense. We don't know if Kenny Pickett's going to play. I don't think he will, but I don't really know if Mitch playing is an improvement for the offense or a negative for the offense. So I think honestly it's about the same. I guess right now I still have Najee ranked ahead of him because he still has been playing ahead of him, but Jaylen Warren is much more involved in the passing game, seems to have more explosive plays. So I guess between them is kind of just what you want, but I don't think that there's a clear lead back here. And honestly, it seems like at this point, Jaylen Warren is going to take him over eventually. I don't know exactly what or when that will happen, but it's something we want to keep our eye on. I think you can play both of them, but I'm not that excited about either. And then the last guy in my top 30, I'm going to have Gus Edwards here, who seems like the lead back, at least for right now in Baltimore, which part of that offense, you're always going to have a decent shot at scoring a touchdown. They're playing on the other side of the Pittsburgh Steelers, so the Pittsburgh Steelers, not a very good defense so far against the running back. And so you can definitely see him have a good week this week, although Justice Hill, Keaton Mitchell, Melvin Gordon, there definitely is some competition there, and it could really be anyone's week. If I had to play somebody, it would be Gus Edwards out of all of them. And then one guy kind of outside this top 30 that I wanted to mention is just going to be Tyler Algier. I know he hasn't been very good these past couple of weeks, especially after what we saw for the first week, but they're playing the Houston Texans this week, and that's such a good matchup for running backs where I think that both him and Bijan will be involved. So you can definitely take your shot on Algier this week. But I honestly don't think it's much more than that. There's just a path where he could have a good week. I don't know. I don't really think that he will. It seems like Bijan is kind of fully taken over, but with how much they want to run the ball and how bad this defense is at stopping it, I think that there's definitely an outcome where he could have a good week. So here are my top 30 running backs for week 5. Let me know what you guys think about them. Any guys I left off that you think that should be on here. And like I said at the beginning of the video, any sit start questions, just leave them down below and I will get back to you. And my wide receiver ranking should be coming out pretty soon, so make sure you subscribe so you can see that.